This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us on Raising Me. Each week, we dive into the ups, the downs, highs and lows of parenting, often perhaps with the things that no one ever taught us about, and go to the experts for advice. I'm Adrienne Stein, longtime journalist and a mom of 3, and today we are talking about something that can really set our kids up for a lifetime of success: money, which can also be very stressful and filled with a whole lot of self-doubt. So we're going to focus on both saving and the beginning steps of investing. Our expert, Jon Paradise, is with Town & Country Federal Credit Union and is passionate about teaching people about money. He's also the spokesperson for Financial Matters, which is a regular segment here at our CBS and Fox affiliate in Portland. Plus, he's a dad of 2 grown kids and draws from life experiences of teaching his own kids, allowing them to really safely make their own mistakes in order to help them grow. So, whether you want your kids to understand how to save for that cool new gadget, whatever it might be, or start putting money away for something bigger or even long-term, there are a lot of takeaways in this conversation for all of us. And a lot of lessons you'll find can come from everyday moments. Check it out. Jon, thank you so much for coming in today, because this is a topic I really have been so curious about. We're kind of going through it right now in my household, but let's just start out with the basics of why is it so important to be having these conversations about investing and money with our kids?
Well, I think first of all, by the way, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I think the most important thing is kids grow up and become adults. And that's the generation of consumers. And now more and more kids have access to a much more greater pile of disposable income than, our generation or generations before us certainly had. So I think if kids have some sort of understanding and those conversations start to take place before they get to 18, 25, et cetera, it's going to be imperative to have those conversations, because otherwise they are literally flying by the seat of their pants.
And sometimes it's too late, or they're just going to make larger mistakes.
Right.
And mistakes are going to be okay.
Right.
They are going to happen, but the idea would be to help them through those things at a much earlier age.
Right. It's the way I look at it is it's okay to have your child fall down. Everybody falls down. You put a Band-Aid on it, whatever. Same thing with financial issues. It's okay for your child to make some boo-boos, so to speak, but you've got to make sure you address them, and you've got to make sure they understand why what they did led to certain consequences, and why other decisions may have been more positive outcomes. So I think if you have those conversations, and I'm not saying they're necessarily easy, because kids haven't changed a lot as far as they know everything. I thought I knew everything, and I think if you go into that understanding, most of it will go on in one ear and out the other, but there'll be some nuggets that they remember. I mean, it's I've seen it with my own children. And you think, well, they didn't hear anything I said about, money or turning off lights or, making.
But suddenly it comes back.
But suddenly when they have their own place, turn off that light, or why am I getting charged a fee to pay my electric bill online when all I have to do is use bill pay? And it's great that they're looking, it's only $6, but they're starting to realize that every $6 adds up. It can add up to $100 or whatever over the course of time. So I think, the main point is to start having those conversations, because kids become adults. And once they become adults, those mistakes are a lot harder to clean up.
At what age should we start having these conversations about the concept of investing, the concept of savings? And I'm asking that too, knowing that some parents are probably listening to this with a 15, 16, 17-year-old at home going, "Oh, I haven't even started." So let's just start with no guilt, because the important thing is just to start.
Right.
But is there sort of a sweet spot? Or is there ever a spot that's too early to start having these kind of conversations?
I never think it's too early, so to speak. But I think sometimes our expectations are way above what that age probably will understand. I don't think I think you can make it age appropriate. Like, say you have a 5-year-old and you're trying to explain to your 5-year-old, they want, whatever toy. But they also want a new backpack, let's say. Their old backpack is fine, but it's a new one. And it's the latest movie, around the latest movie, okay? You have to explain to them, and I think you can explain to them, listen, if we get the backpack, you can't get the toy. Or here's how long it's going to take with your chores or your allowance. And I'm a big proponent of rewarding or paying kids their own money for doing set chores, not paying them just to do normal things, but if they're
like the above and beyond,
I think it's a good, and if possible, have cash, because I think the more they can touch and feel money, especially younger, they can have that concept of, this is $5. Here's what I can get for $5. And then maybe if they want to go reward themselves, you can bring them to the store. Part of the fun is spending it, I mean,
it's tangible.
It's tangible.
And I got to tell you, it is so cute. I remember my 4-year-old had started saving money and took his little wallet to the counter and bought a little Lego set. It is absolutely
wonderful.
Precious.
It's
the
wonderful. They smile. They feel like king or queen of the world.
They feel like such an adult, sure.
But so I think, you can start at age appropriate. But I think the real time to start having a much more serious conversation is at least in middle school, if not, if you want to wait a little bit longer, maybe first year of high school, because that's when a lot of kids have started to do some first jobs. They've, especially in freshman, sophomore year of high school, but in middle school, a lot more kids are doing, odd jobs or whatever, and they have more disposable income, or they're getting a higher allowance or whatever it is. So I think you need to have that conversation that everything you earn, you can't spend. Because I think kids so often think, oh, well, it's my money.
Burns a hole in their pocket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yes, it is their money. And I think it's important to say, yes, it's your money, but here's a rule of thumb for saving it. You've got to save half of it. And then you can spend 25%, and the other 25% will do for an emergency. Have them get into that concept of, you need to make some decisions early on. What do you want and what do you need? If they want a, new golf club or a new basketball, great. Do they need it? Is their old one not in good shape? And I think you need to, as a parent, need to let them make some of those decisions, but also don't say, you're on your own. You're making money. You're going to have to pay for everything. I think that builds resentment. I think with kids, and I think that makes money a really negative thing. I don't think money needs to be negative. I think, despite what people say, it's not the root of all evil. It can be a really positive thing, especially if you have a healthy relationship with it, and you're a role model. As a parent, you're a role model to how your child perceives it. And I think it's okay to say money causes some stress, and that's okay, but you have to talk about it.
Yeah, and I to that point, how do we, and I think maybe it is just that those open conversations and dialogues, how do we avoid instilling that fear and anxiety around money, particularly for parents who don't work in the financial industry, who maybe don't feel confident or competent about their own money saving or money investing skills?
Well, again, these are difficult conversations. Back 20 years ago, I started, along with a couple of other colleagues, these financial fitness fairs. And we would go around to various high schools and have kids get a job. We assign them a job. They'd go around and have to make the budget work out. And kids and teachers would say, especially teachers would say, I wish I had this growing up. And so I think my point is, have conversations that are timely. If something has happened, like say your car has a huge repair that you have to get fixed, don't hide it. Just say, listen, this is a tough one. So maybe we can't get pizza on Friday nights for a few weeks. We're not going to cut everything out, but it's okay to say, we like pizza, but let's hold back.
We're saving our money a
right.
little bit because and understanding that because
right.
portion of
right.
it.
I think too often, yes, make sacrifices, of course, and I think all parents and guardians make unbelievable sacrifices all the time for their children. And I think it's not saying to your child, listen, I'm sacrificing this for you. But I think they need to understand that you have to make some sacrifices because having a healthy relationship with money is all about choices. And those choices have consequences. If my car broke down and it's $1,000 repair and I'm still going to get pizza every night,
where does that money come from?
So that's the whole concept. And I think just getting those pieces of information out as often as possible, and I think sharing personal stories of back in my day, in some form or another, this is what I did, this is what I learned, or I was able to go on a special trip, or things like that, and let them come. You don't have to decide it for them. I think oftentimes, if you lead them down the right conversation, they'll come to a pretty healthy conclusion. I mean, every kid's gonna challenge somebody telling them what to do with their money. But I think if you put it in a way that they can understand and basically, say that, mom and dad aren't always going to be here to bail you out. And this is what happens if you do X. This is what happens if you do Y. Maybe we'll help you once, but the second time you're on your own. It's like if you get a parking ticket. I had a child that got a couple of parking tickets. After the second one, I said,
You're on your own, kid. Right. You can't park there.
You can't park there, and that's the consequence. She never got another parking ticket. And, I think if you let them understand that their choices impact their bottom line.
But they have consequences.
Right.
And, I think, too, going back to like parents, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, you don't have to be an expert to have valuable insight.
Absolutely
and sometimes it's the mistakes that we have made as parents, whether, as a kid growing up or early in your adulthood or even later in your adulthood, that there are lessons to be taught through that. So
Absolutely.
You don't have to be this financial expert to have a lot to offer the
you
kids.
Definitely do not. I don't want people thinking I'm not a certified financial planner. I happen to work in financial services, so I know a lot kind of by proxy, if you will. But I'm not by no means an investment expert or anything, but I've learned enough and I've listened enough and had those conversations. And I think, anybody has some good information to give. You just need to be willing to share it. I think, too often parents feel like they have to be perfect. And, you have to have, the perfect bedtime. You have to feed them at a certain time.
You got it all together.
All that stuff. And I think that causes stress in and of itself.
Yeah.
I go back to, my mother used to say when we would take our kids to Disney World, she goes, now understand, they're not going to be able to make the whole day. They're little. So go what you can do, enjoy it, but then take a break. Don't say you're going to have fun. And that, if you go in with that mindset as far as financial goes and say, listen, I'd like you to understand some of these things. So that's why I'm sharing them with you. And don't be afraid about repeating them. And do it in a way that's just casual. Don't say, little Jimmy, it's time to have a financial talk because they're going to
sit down.
you. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if you can do it and
more in the
provide
moment.
examples, like if you go shopping with them, let them go and do some of their own. Do you have a coupon? Hey, what's a coupon? It's amazing. Certain kids don't have any concept of it. Well, it's $10 off this thing. So instead of paying $40, you're going to pay $30. Oh, wow. And those types of things. So if you can be there to at least be engaged, I think kids will get a lot more appreciation for what you have to say. And, I think what you have to say matters, but you've got to be willing to say it.
Yeah, well, right. I think too, I'm thinking in terms of saving versus investing, because there comes a time where kids, maybe they start with a savings account.
Mm-hmm.
How do you sort of teach the concept of savings versus investing?
That would be more of a high school, I think, especially for a variety of reasons. There are regulations as far as what accounts certain ages can have. But, I think depending on what kind of terms you're looking at, I think certificates are a great option. There have been some great certificate rates by a bunch of financial institutions and lenders that, pay pretty well. Just make sure that you don't get locked into a term that is beyond when you're going to need to access that money.
That's a key.
So, right now, my son opened a 7-month certificate, a great rate, but he also is graduating next year. So in 7 months, he'll be able to access that money and you will use it for whatever college-related things. There was also a 3-year term that paid a little bit better, but it's 3 years.
Right, so it's locked in for 3 years.
I said to him, do you really want to get locked into that? There's consequences. So, he made that decision on his own. And now he's come to me and he said, I have another $2,000 I want to put in a certificate. What length do you think I should do? And should I do a 6 month? Should I do a 9 month? And so we figured it out and he went and did it on his own. So I think I was proud that I didn't say, you're going to save that money. Now, to answer your question, I think investing for, if kids have opportunities, especially when they become, 18 or so, to take a 401k or things like that, that's when you want to guide them in the right direction. I think the explanation is you talking to them about, listen, I have a 401k. This is how much I get for putting money in. My company will give me X amount of money. And that's a hard concept to understand. But I think if you let them know, listen, I put in 5% last year, whatever that figures out to, let's say $10,000. My company also put in $10,000 that I didn't have to do anything for. So now instead of $10,000, I have $20,000. Same next year. And I think kids I know, having 2 adult daughters, they are like, hey, this is great.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I do this? That they asked the question I wanted them to ask. And they knew the answer without me having to answer it.
Well, and you had the conversations throughout their upbringing so that this was a familiar concept.
Right. But it's okay if parents are thinking, oh, I haven't had that conversation.
Yeah.
My kid doesn't know what a 401k is. That's okay. But have some sort of conversation with them.
Just start. Essentially is the message.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
I think too about, this recently came up because my 16-year-old got her first job and suddenly she's in the money and, no living expenses. And here she is making all this cash. And we had a conversation like, does it just go into a savings account or do you start with the investing process?
I think it's never bad to, a lot of certificates you can open for $250, $500. That's not a lot of money. but you can watch it grow pretty quickly. So it's a nice introduction to investment, I think. If you can look at some of those short-term certificates, depending on when she's going to graduate, if it's 2 years, look into a 24-month certificate. If it's 3 years, look into a 36 months, depending on rates, and have them be involved in that process. Don't just say, I'm going to put this money in a certificate for you. Have them be part of that process and have them understand why it's a better option to put some of their money in a certificate than it is to put all of their money in savings. And the reason is savings pays less in interest.
Is there like a sort of a magic formula kind of split on what should go in savings and what should go in investing when it comes to, teens and their jobs and where they are?
I think probably, 50% in savings, 25% in investment. And I am a big believer in at least having some money left over to do whatever.
Right.
Because I think it can't be all or nothing. I think too often, it's like losing weight. When you say, I'm going to lose 50 pounds and you end up losing 25 pounds, you feel like a failure. So I think I want something, I'm going to lose whatever I can. So I think if you have and they can make those decisions, what they're going to do with that. They may end up saying, and I've seen it more often than not, I'm going to save more money. I'm going to put more money into it.
Because it feels good.
It feels good.
Right.
It feels really, my son asked me a couple of weeks ago, I want to do a budget. Can you do a budget with me?
Did your jaw hit the floor?
It did. And I'm thinking to myself, well, first of all, you're going to have to cut back on those takeouts. But the fact that he understands it because he has a lot more money in his hands now. And he likes the feeling. He's like, hey, Dad, I saved $400 last week. And I'm like, great. And prior to that, a couple of years ago, I used to have to move money from his checking to his savings. And he would get all mad. Why are you doing that? Now he does it on his own. But, and I think you're going to have some discussions, maybe a few raised voices every now and then initially. But I think if you can get them in the habit of doing some investing, doing some savings, and having some money left over, that they can do what they want. You can guide them. You can say, listen, do you really want to spend it all on this? And maybe they do.
Well, but their mistakes are good lessons in financial literacy too. Yeah. We're talking mostly about teens and then these young adults, but I know there are like simulations online that you can kind of practice budgeting and things. Is there value in that for the younger kids
Absolutely.
to kind of, quote unquote, play around with before they get to where they're putting in their hard-earned, 15, 20 bucks an hour?
That's what apps and technology are great for. They can run through all kinds of different simulations. Another thing that I think is important is if you have a credit card, add your child as a user as soon as you can, because that establishes their credit very early on. Now, you can put a special limit on theirs. Maybe they can only charge $200 or it's only for emergencies, but they've got credit because of you. And, like my daughter, who's 23 now, we put her on her credit card at 16. She only used it for emergencies. She was very good about it. And now her credit score is 750. And she's only been working for a year or so. And so why that matters is she's going to want to buy a car. And the better your credit score, the lower your rate of interest. And those are more lengthy, in-depth, because it's hard to get your concept around it. But I think you can have that role, just like have them get a debit card. And most financial institutions will offer a debit card at, young age, 14, 12, et cetera. Find out what it is, because they have control over it. You have ultimate supervision over it. And if you think, listen, I need to step in, you're the parent after all. Freedom is great, but you have to, within reason. But I think the great thing about a lot of debit cards for kids is there are rewards that go along with it. So if they use it, say they use it 10 times a month or 12 times a month just to get, a snack or whatever it is, not a particular, high expense, they'll get a reward and they'll get extra interest. And they'll see that, they'll be like, oh, That's great. They get all kinds of benefits from that, but they're also getting extra interest and they're getting rewarded and they're seeing that, if I do this, just my everyday stuff, then I'll get benefit from it. And, I can see the results from it. Doesn't mean go out and spend more money,
Right.
but if you're already buying a energy drink or, a pretzel or whatever, and you do that a few times a week, if you're like, I'll just use my debit card. And then you can watch them and they can track their spending instead of, well, what'd you spend your money on? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
You can watch it and they have that history. And then there's another opportunity, a learning opportunity for you to step in and say, listen, you did this, what's going on here? How come, and maybe there have been times when I've looked at it and my child has said, I didn't make that purchase. So you call and you realize their debit card has been hacked. And that's how, and that gets another good habit. You're the only one who can really be responsible for your finances. And I think it's good to look at your finances and know what's going on. And that, I think kids are attuned to that. Certainly they are appreciative of if something's happened to their debit card. Believe me, they look at every cent.
Every single red cent. That's where my
Absolutely.
16-year-old
Yes.
is, right? She knows everything. Part of when we have these conversations about investing specifically, so much of it is risk and reward and understanding that concept, those concepts and working together. Are there any sort of good ways to teach kids about those concepts of risk versus reward?
I think initially, a good idea is to kind of maybe incentivize, be that a little nudge. Maybe if maybe you can do your own 401k kind of simulation with your child. Listen, if you save $500 this summer, I'll give you $100 bonus. And it's kind of like your own little 401k, like I said. And so, but if you don't, I will charge you for all your summer lunches. And so there's the reward, but there's also the risk. And I think if you put it in those understandable terms, you can it's much easier for them to understand, and you won't believe how competitive, you will, having kids, how competitive they are. And if you give them a goal, give them a tangible goal, don't make it be like, you've got to save $1,500 when they only make $1,600 for the summer. Have it be a realistic goal. Or maybe sit down with them and say, what do you think's fair? What do you think's fair? And what can you afford as a parent? If you can't afford giving them $100 match, give them a $50 match or something. There's the reward, but also, have them be some consequences. And, I think kids like that. And they like the engagement opportunity. Yes, like I said, technology is awesome. But if you can have some human support and some real tangible results mixed in,
the goal setting is so important. No matter your age. I wonder too. Just we have talked about how important it is to have these conversations and the regular dialogue around investing and saving and money. How candid do you think we should be as parents when it comes to the family financial situation? Debt, income. Investment strategy, whatever it might be.
And I'm smiling because it's a challenge.
There's
nothing,
and there's no right or wrong answer.
No right or wrong
just kind
answer.
of curious. Working in the
being
industry,
as transparent as you're comfortable with. I'm not a huge proponent because I think sometimes kids take it the wrong way, and they're all, if you say, well, what's your salary, and you tell them your salary, and they'll say, oh, so I need to make X, and if I don't, I'm not going to be able to do. That gets into some negative stuff. And I don't, kids are, they share sometimes information you don't want shared. But I think it's okay to say, listen, we have a mortgage on whatever, or we have a car payment. This is what our car payment is. This is, because we have a good credit score, we're only paying X amount in interest. When we didn't have a good credit score, we paid a lot more, or whatever it is. And I think it's okay to share. Debt isn't bad. People have debt. It's how you manage it. And maybe do a celebration if you pay off your mortgage, just say, listen, let's have a party. We paid off our mortgage or whatever it is.
It could be a credit card.
It could be a credit card.
It doesn't have
exactly.
Right. Though paying off a mortgage would be amazing.
Yes, yeah. But I think having conversations that lets them understand you've had struggles. We've had to make decisions, and one of my children the other day said, I didn't know how much vacations used to cost, and how did we end up doing that? And I'm like, well, we sacrificed this. Remember when we didn't do this, but we were able to do this, and oh yeah, now I wish that lit a light bulb in my head, and I think, oh, I wish I'd talked more about it then. Yeah. But I think the fact that they're asking those types of questions means they're ready, certainly, to understand it. But it's like I said, finances don't have to be a dirty word, and they don't have to be negative. Too often it's like, oh, it's all about money. No, you need to, I think it's very important to weigh, yes, we need money to live. Yes, we need money to pay different expenses. But all the money in the world is not going to make you happy. And I think you need to understand as a parent and as a child, you need to convey that message of, listen, yes, I make a comfortable salary, but I also love what I do. And I could make more money if I was doing something else, but you like to see me at night. Well, yes. You like going, you like doing this. You like the fact that I could coach your sports or whatever. Yes. Well, that's why I didn't take X job or whatever it is. So I think if you can convey that message of, yes, money is something that we have to have, but it's not the only thing. And without happiness and without, a contentment, a comfort level, and liking, passion, what you're doing, it doesn't matter how much you make, because you'll always be searching for more. And I think too often kids are, because it's the next shiny thing. And I think too often they see, well, so-and-so has a car. So-and-so has a brand new car. Well, good for so-and-so.
Yeah.
And maybe you go into why so-and-so can have a new car. Maybe they only have one child. Or maybe their grandparents gave it to them. You don't know the story of it, but I think it's really important for parents to not compare themselves with the Joneses.
Yeah, well, comparison is the thief of joy. We've heard
is.
that so often. It's so true when it comes to money and so many things, especially in the age of social media, which is another conversation we could go down to. Jon, if there was one takeaway today for parents, what would that be?
Have the conversation. I can't have the conversation. Have some sort of conversation. Doing something is much better than doing nothing. Don't just worry about money. Don't just worry about, I don't know how so-and-so is going to afford to do this, without talking to them and having a conversation of like, listen, I know you want to do this and I know you want to go to X school, but listen, here's the impact. And what do you think? A lot of times they'll surprise you, and they'll be willing and open to the fact that you cared enough to have that conversation. Do you know everything? Of course not. But you're there, and I think oftentimes kids feel alone. And I think when they make a mistake financially, it's like, oh, why did I do that? And they don't tell you. And you see them suffering, and it can cause a lot of angst. And I think my major point would be, have the conversation. Don't be afraid to have them not tell you a lot, but at least have that conversation to open up the lines of communication. And again, it goes back to do something. No, we never are going to know all there is to know about what's the best way to manage money. But if we can all do it and do it in a way that is positive and drives continued communications. And I love getting calls and texts from my oldest daughter saying, what do you think about this? And I'm like, bingo. What do you think? I always put it back to them now. She's 23. And then I'm thrilled with her decisions. And I'm like, she did listen.
Yeah.
Not to pat yourself on the back, but I think part of parenting is seeing long-term results. I can guarantee you're not going to see the short-term results with money right off the bat. But if you're patient, have the conversation, be willing to have it again and again, and share examples and have that dialogue that it's okay. It's okay not to know everything, and it's okay to fall down. I'm always happy to help you get up. I'm not going to pick you up every time, but I'll help you get up. There's a difference there. Mom and dad aren't always, our kids have told them that we'll always help if we can, but we're not going to bail you out of every financial decision because that wouldn't be helpful
doesn't help
for you.
them.
Exactly.
No.
And I think they appreciate that. And I think they understand that, but they know it. We didn't keep it silent. We didn't just say it, my wife and I just didn't say it to each other. We said it to our kids and we had that open communication of, listen, we understand it's tough, and we're helping any way we can. Doesn't mean we're not going to love you, but some things happen and you'll learn from it.
Yeah, sometimes it is a little tough
Right.
love.
It's like the parking tickets.
Right. It goes back to the parking tickets. You can't park there. No, honest, open dialogue really is the key in so many things, but particularly when it comes to this.
And it's not a one and done. We're all still learning about, we're learning about what are we going to do in retirement? What are we going to do as far as affording this and keeping all of our liking to travel and eat out? How are we going to have them? You're always having some sort of financial dilemma, and they're different at different ages. But I think you can have that conversation. There's nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing to say, hey, what do you think? Sometimes kids give the best answers.
Yeah, they
do.
Jon, thank you so much. Really appreciate your
pleasure.
time
This
and
was a
your
pleasure.
insight. And I do want to mention we'll have more resources on our website, wgme.com/raisingme. Always a pleasure, Jon.
Thank you.
Here's a reminder for me. Just start having those conversations about money in a more intentional way with openness, honesty, and really just keeping at it. It is okay for our kids to make those mistakes with money and can even be good. It's how we all learn. Falling down, part of the process. And I did like what Jon said about, I'll be here to help you up, not pick you up, really helping our kids through the what went wrong and why. And, I'll just add with empathy in this case, they're learning and hopefully receptive to learning as well. Also, making money tangible, using cash to see money literally come and go. It is such a good base of understanding to start, though. Of course, as I mentioned, I recently found out my teenager who had her first summer job this year, watches every penny digitally. And that, according to her, is the real money. That's how she sees it. Cash almost sees it like paper that doesn't really count. So yeah, we got some work to do, but we are having those conversations of clearly defining a need versus a want as well when it comes to spending our money. And then saving and investing. Just starting small, right? It doesn't have to be some big, overwhelming thing. High school kids with their first job, great place to start. And Jon had that guideline, 50% to saving, 25% to investing, and that 25% for fun, which is so important. So we're having these conversations actually with our middle schooler after he just completely wiped out his savings to buy something he'd been saving up for. And that, moving forward, you do not clear out your money. And we're helping him to make sure that he takes a certain percentage out from what he earns and put it away. And again, a lesson that came up again, like it did from our money mindset episode, which you would find in the episode list. You do not have to be a financial expert to have a lot to teach your kids about this. The important part, as we have learned again, is just to start having these conversations. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, if you give us a positive rating and review, that helps others to find this message. And we really appreciate that. So wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.